The sky above Earth was clear, but not quiet. A massive alien ship hovered just beyond the atmosphere, casting a soft shadow over the Pacific Ocean. It had arrived 2 days ago without warning, its shape unlike anything built by human hands. Smooth, curved, and glowing with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. People all over the world watched it on their screens, talked about it in cafes, schools, and homes. Some were afraid. Others were curious, but most felt something deeper, a sense of being watched, judged, maybe even tested. The aliens called themselves the Zalari. They came from far away, from stars humans had only just begun to name. They said they had been watching Earth for a long time. Not secretly, they claimed, but openly, like gods looking down on a young species still learning how to walk. And now, they had come to speak. The United Space Command arranged a meeting. It took place in a high-tech hall near Denver, deep inside a mountain where no one could sneak in or interrupt. Inside, rows of seats faced a raised platform where the Zalari delegation would stand. Lucas Grant sat in the second row, notebook open on his lap. He wore a simple gray jacket and kept his hair short and neat. He wasn't a soldier or a politician. He was a linguist, someone who studied languages, both old and new. He had been called here because of what he knew, not what he could do. The Zalari spoke in voices that sounded like music, soft, layered tones that made people feel calm. But under that calmness, there was something else, something cold. The Zalari didn't use translators. They said they could understand every language spoken on Earth. And when they spoke, their words came out perfectly in English, Spanish, Mandarin, French, every known tongue. But Lucas noticed something strange. During the first few minutes of the meeting, the Zalari used symbols in their visual communication. Lines and shapes flashed on the screen behind them, appearing for just a second before vanishing again. Lucas leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. Those symbols, he had seen them before. They reminded him of an old book he once found in a dusty library at the university. The book was about ancient ruins discovered deep in the Amazon jungle. No one knew who built them. They were too old, too advanced, and carved into the stone walls were symbols, lines, circles, spirals, just like the ones on the screen. Lucas wrote them down quickly in his notebook. He circled one that stood out. It looked like a spiral with 3 dots around it. As the meeting continued, the Zalari began to speak more clearly. They told humanity that they were not ready to join the galactic community, that Earth was still too young, too chaotic, too violent. Your kind, one of them said, her voice smooth as silk, has much to learn. There were murmurs among the human delegation. Some nodded in agreement. Others frowned. Lucas stayed quiet, his fingers tapping lightly on the edge of his notebook. Then, something happened. One of the Zalari glanced at the screen behind them. The same symbol, the spiral with 3 dots, flashed again. For just a moment, the alien's face changed. Her eyes blinked slowly and her lips pressed together. It was gone almost instantly, but Lucas saw it. Fear. Not anger, not confusion. Fear. He sat up straighter. His heart beat faster. Why would a powerful alien race be afraid of a symbol? After the meeting ended, Lucas walked outside. The air was cool, and the sun was setting behind the mountains. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Nina Baxter, subject, "Need to talk. It's important." Nina Baxter lived in a small town in Georgia. She taught archaeology at a local college and spent most of her time digging through dirt and old records. She had short brown hair and always wore boots, even indoors. She got Lucas's message while grading papers late at night. At first, she thought it was another joke. Lucas often sent strange messages when he got excited about some forgotten dialect or lost word. But this one was different. She read it again. "Need to talk. It's important." So she replied with one word, "Okay." 2 days later, she stepped off. A shuttle at the United Space Command base in Colorado. She carried only a backpack and a worn leather journal. Lucas met her at the entrance. He looked tired but excited. "You're going to want to see this," he said. Inside, he showed her the video footage from the meeting. He paused it whenever the Zalari symbols appeared on screen. "These," he said, pointing at the frozen image. "They look familiar." Nina tilted her head. Then her eyes widened slightly. "I've seen these before," she whispered. "In the Amazon?" Lucas asked. "Yes, in the ruins. We never figured out what they meant. Most people thought they were decorative or religious symbols." "But you didn't think so," Lucas said. "No," she admitted. "I thought they might be writing. Maybe part of a language we don't know." Lucas smiled. "That's exactly what I think." He handed her his notebook. She flipped through the pages. There were sketches of the symbols, notes beside them, even comparisons to other ancient scripts. "This one," he said, pointing to the spiral with 3 dots, "appears more than any other. I think it's a key, a name, maybe, or a title." Nina frowned, or a warning. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the Zalari ship still floated in the sky, silent and unmoving. Inside, something had begun. Over the next few weeks, Lucas and Nina worked together. They compared the symbols to other ancient texts, ones found in caves, temples, and even on the moon. They found matches. Not exact copies, but variations. Similar shapes, same patterns. The more they looked, the clearer it became. These symbols were everywhere. In Egypt, in Peru, on Mars, and always, they were buried beneath layers of time and dust. Lucas started building a database. He labeled each symbol, noted where it was found, and tried to guess what it might mean. Nina helped him translate. She knew how ancient cultures worked, how they thought, how they wrote. Together they began to form a picture. This wasn't just a language. It was a system, a code, and it was old, older than any known human civilization. One night while working, in a secure lab, Lucas played back the Zalari speech again. This time he slowed it down. He focused on the symbols that flashed behind them. Something caught his eye. A symbol he hadn't seen before. It looked like a triangle inside a circle, with lines radiating outward. He froze the frame and stared at it. "What is that?" Nina asked. "I don't know," Lucas said. "But I think it's important." They added it to the database. The next day, someone visited the lab. A man in a dark suit, with short hair and a calm voice. He introduced himself as Agent Carl Moore from the Department of Planetary Security. He asked polite questions about their work, about the symbols, about why they were suddenly interested in old ruins. Lucas answered carefully. Nina said little. When Moore left, they looked at each other. "We're being watched," Nina said. Lucas nodded. "We must be getting close." Back in the halls of power, the Zalari continued their visits. They met with world leaders, scientists, and military officials. They spoke in calm voices, offering advice, warnings, and sometimes commands. But behind closed doors, things were different. At a private meeting between Zalari diplomats and high-ranking humans, one of the aliens asked a question. "What do the humans know about the old tongue?" No one answered right away. Finally, a woman said, "Nothing, just myths, legends." The Zalari diplomat stared at her. "They must not learn," she said. "Not yet." Another Zalari nodded. "If they speak it, they will remember." "And if they remember," the first one said, "then we are no longer gods." Back in the lab, Lucas and Nina kept working. Late at night, when the lights were low and the machines hummed softly, they spoke in whispers. "What if this language isn't just old," Nina said, "but forbidden?" Lucas looked up from his screen. "Forbidden by whom?" "The Zalari," she said. "What if they erased it from history? What if they made sure no one remembered?" Lucas thought about that. He looked at the symbols again. Then he said, "Then we need to remember." And somewhere deep in the earth, in the ruins no one had touched in thousands of years, something waited. A voice. A truth. a language waiting to be spoken again. Lucas and Nina sat in the dim light of the lab, surrounded by stacks of old books, digital tablets, and printed maps. The air smelled like dust and old paper. Outside, the world moved on as usual, unaware of what they had found. Inside this quiet room, something bigger was beginning to take shape. They had spent weeks comparing symbols, tracing their origins across Earth and even into space. Every match made them more certain. They were dealing with a language older than any known civilization. But it wasn't just ancient, it was hidden, buried beneath layers of time, myth, and silence. One night, Lucas stood up from his desk and stretched. His back ached from hours of sitting, but his mind was sharp. "I think I've got something," he said, tapping on his tablet. Nina looked over. Her eyes were tired but curious. "What?" she asked. "This symbol." He pointed at the screen. "The triangle inside a circle, remember? We saw it flash behind the Zilari during the meeting." She nodded. "Well," he continued, "I found another version of it. Not on Earth this time." He turned the screen toward her. There, on a grainy image taken from an old Mars rover mission, was the same symbol carved into a rock wall deep in Valles Marineris, the largest canyon system on Mars. Nina's breath caught. "That can't be right," she whispered. "It is," Lucas said. "And there's more." He scrolled down to show her other findings. The same symbol had been found under ice on the moon, etched into the hull of a long-dead satellite orbiting Venus, and even painted on the walls of a cave in Siberia. Someone, or something, left these all over, Lucas said. And someone tried to erase them, Nina added. They both fell silent. Meanwhile, outside the lab, life went on. At a small bar, near the edge of town, a man named Logan Brewer sat nursing a drink. He wore a faded jacket and had the look of someone who had seen too much and said too little. Once, he had been a Marine. Now, he worked security at the United Space Command, Bussy. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. That night, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Lucas Logan. "Need someone we can trust. Can you meet us?" L. Logan read it twice. Then he replied with one word, "Yes." Back in the lab, Lucas and Nina were joined by Logan the next day. He listened quietly as they explained what they had found. When they showed him the symbols and the places where they had appeared, he frowned. "You're saying aliens left these?" he asked. "No," Lucas said. "We're saying humans might have used this language before we even knew how to build cities." Logan raised an eyebrow. Nina leaned forward. "What if the Zilari didn't create humanity? What if they found us, or inherited us?" Logan stared at her for a moment. Then he said, "If that's true, then why are they hiding it?" Lucas didn't answer right away because he didn't know, but he was going to find out. Over the next few weeks, the group grew. They weren't a team yet, just a handful of people drawn together by questions no one else was asking. Alongside Lucas, Nina and Logan came others, a young engineer named Maya Ross who worked with old signal tech, a historian named Ben Carter who specialized in prehistoric cultures, and a former hacker named Tasha Liu who could get into almost any system. Together they formed a loose circle of researchers, digging deeper into the mystery. They called themselves the Echo Project, because everything they found felt like a whisper from the past, faint, but growing louder. Their first breakthrough came when Maya managed to decode part of the language using an old neural translator. It wasn't perfect, but it gave them a start. One phrase stood out: "You were born of us." No one spoke for a long time after reading it. Then Tasha broke the silence. "If we were born of them," she said, "then who the hell are they?" The more they learned, the more danger they faced. Agent Carl Moore visited the lab again. This time he brought 2 more agents with him. "We've noticed some unusual activity," he said, looking around the room. "Your research has gone beyond normal academic bounds." Lucas kept his voice calm. "We're just studying old symbols." Moore smiled politely. "Yes, but those symbols are sensitive. Some governments have concerns about what you might uncover. Nina stepped forward. Are you saying we should stop? Moore didn't answer directly. I'm saying you should consider the consequences of your work. After they left, the room was quiet. They're watching us, Logan said. They already were, Lucas replied. Now they're warning us. Maya looked worried. Maybe we should slow down. Ben shook his head. No. If they're trying to scare us, that means we're getting close. Tasha tapped on her tablet. Let's see how close. She pulled up a file she had copied before the meeting with Moore. Hidden inside a government archive was a report labeled Project Forgotten Tongue. It had been buried under layers of red tape and encryption. Now, it was open. The report described a discovery made decades ago, a set of carvings found in a cave in northern Africa. The carvings contained the same symbols they had been studying, but there was more. Attached to the report was a video. In it, a researcher stood in front of the carvings. She was speaking in a low voice, clearly nervous. These markings, she said, are not decorative. They form a structured language, and based on our analysis, it predates every known human script. She paused. There's something else, she continued. When we played recordings of reconstructed phrases, the Zalari reacted. A short clip followed. A Zalari diplomat stood in a room filled with scientists. One of the researchers played a sound, a sequence of strange words spoken slowly. The Zalari flinched, not visibly at first, just a twitch in the eye, a slight change in posture. Then the diplomat spoke. You must stop this. The video ended. Silence filled the room. Then Lucas said what everyone was thinking. They're afraid of the language. That night, the group met in secret. They agreed to keep going, but more carefully. They would work in shifts, store copies of their data off-site, and avoid drawing attention. But someone was already watching. Late one evening, while Tasha was working alone in the lab, her computer froze. She tried to reboot it. Nothing. Then a message appeared on the screen. Stop now, or be stopped. She backed away slowly. Minutes later, the lights flickered. Then the power cut out entirely. Outside, a van pulled up. 3 men got out. They walked toward the building. Inside, Tasha grabbed her bag and slipped out through a side door. She ran. Back at the safe house, the others waited anxiously. When Tasha finally arrived, out of breath and shaken, they knew things had changed. We're not just being watched anymore, she said. We're being hunted. Lucas looked at Nina. She met his gaze, and in that moment, they understood. This wasn't just about symbols or history anymore. It was about truth, and someone didn't want it to come out. The night Tasha escaped the lab, the group knew they couldn't stay in one place for long. They moved fast. Within hours, Lucas, Nina, Logan, Maya, Ben, and Tasha were on the move. They split up, each carrying copies of their research. The Echo project was no longer just a study. It was a secret too dangerous to keep in one place. Lucas and Maya took the most complete version of the language database. It was stored on a small, untraceable drive hidden inside an old music player. No. One would think to look there, but someone already knew. Agent Carl Moore had been watching them for weeks. He wasn't alone. Others in the Department of Planetary Security had grown nervous about what the group might uncover. The Zalari hadn't said anything directly, but their silence was louder than words. And now, the humans had gone dark. In the days that followed, the team scattered across the country. Some went underground. Others traveled to remote locations where signals were weak and tracking was harder. Lucas and Maya didn't go far. They stayed close enough to monitor any leaks or new discoveries, but far enough to stay safe. That's when Lucas got a message from someone unexpected. It was from Dr. Elias Monroe, a linguist who had once worked with NASA before disappearing from public life. His name came up only in obscure forums and forgotten reports. The message was short. You're not the first. Lucas stared at the screen. Maya leaned over his shoulder. Who is that? A ghost, he said. He vanished 5 years ago. She frowned. Why is he contacting you now? Lucas didn't answer. He sent a reply. Who are you? The response came quickly. Someone who knows what you found. Come to Titan, if you dare. Maya looked shocked. Titan? That's on Saturn. Lucas nodded slowly. We need answers, and we can't get them here. Back on Earth, Nina wasn't so lucky. One morning, as she walked out of a small cafe, near her apartment, 2 men approached her. They didn't wear uniforms, but she recognized the look. The same calm, controlled movements she had seen in Agent Moore. Dr. Baxter, one of them said. We need to talk. She tried to walk away. A hand grabbed her arm. I wouldn't do that, the second man said softly. She turned back, heart pounding. Inside the black van waiting nearby, she was taken to a secure facility deep in the mountains. She wasn't hurt, but she wasn't free either. For 3 days, she sat in a small room with no windows. A guard stood outside the door. Meals were passed through a slot. No one asked her questions. They didn't have to. She knew why she was there. To stop her from speaking. On Titan, Lucas and Maya arrived aboard a civilian freighter. The moon was cold and dark, covered in thick clouds and icy winds. Few people lived there, mostly scientists, engineers, and off-grid traders. They met with Dr. Monroe in a hidden lab beneath an abandoned mining station. He was older than Lucas expected, with gray hair and tired eyes. But his mind was sharp. You've found more than you should have, Monroe said, looking at the data Lucas brought. Lucas nodded. We need help. We don't know what we're dealing with. Monroe sighed. I wish I could say it gets easier. He pulled up a file on his tablet. It showed images of ruins buried under Martian ice. These symbols, he said, pointing at the screen, are not alien, not entirely. They belong to something older than the Zalari. Maya frowned. Older than them? Monroe nodded. Much older. And they weren't just written. They were spoken. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. What happens? He asked. If we speak them again? Monroe looked at him for a long time. They remember. Back on Earth, Nina was finally questioned. She sat across from Agent Moore in a small white room. The lights buzzed softly overhead. We know what you've been doing, Moore said. Nina didn't respond. Moore leaned forward. You're playing with fire, Doctor. You don't understand what you're dealing with. She finally spoke. Then tell me. Moore shook his head. We're not allowed. Allowed by whom? She asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos of ancient ruins, broken tablets, and strange carvings. This language, Moore said, was erased for a reason. Nina flipped through the pages. By whom? Moore looked at her carefully. The Zalari, he said. They didn't create humanity. They inherited us. Nina's breath caught. They wiped our history, he continued. Buried our past. Rewrote our origins. She swallowed hard. Why? Moore closed the folder. Because if we remember, he said, they lose control. Meanwhile, on Titan, Lucas and Maya worked with Monroe to decode more of the language. They used old signal tech, neural translators, and even fragments of recordings made during early space missions. Piece by piece, they built meaning from sound. They discovered phrases like, return to the light. We are the ones who came before. You are not lost. Each phrase triggered something in the systems around them. Lights flickered. Old machines hummed to life. Even the air seemed heavier, charged with something unseen. Maya whispered, this isn't just language, it's power. Lucas looked at her. Or memory. Monroe nodded. It's both. Back on Earth, Nina was released, not because they trusted her, but because she hadn't said anything. As she stepped out into the cold air, she pulled her coat tighter around her. She needed to find Lucas. She needed to warn him, Because the government wasn't the only one watching, so were the Zalari. That night, Lucas received another message from Nina. They know. You're in danger. He read it twice. Maya looked at him. What is it? They found her, he said, and now they know where I am. Monroe stood up. Then we need to move. Fast. They packed what they could. The lab was no longer safe. Outside, the wind howled across Titan's frozen surface. Inside, a quiet war was beginning. One fought not with weapons, but with words. And those words were starting to wake something up, something that had been waiting a very long time. The wind howled across Titan's frozen surface, carrying fine dust and ice through the air like a whisper from another time. Inside the hidden lab beneath the old mining station, Lucas, Maya, and Dr. Monroe worked quickly. They had little time. Lucas looked at the message from Nina again. They know. You're in danger. He didn't doubt it. But they couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close. Monroe led them to an old terminal buried under layers of dust and forgotten code. It was part of a long-abandoned research project from decades ago, one that had been quietly shut down after strange signals were detected deep in space. They tried to erase this, Monroe said, wiping off the screen. But not everything can be deleted. Maya leaned in. What kind of signals? Monroe tapped a few keys. The screen flickered, then came to life with lines of data. Listen. A low hum filled the room. Then, faintly, voices. Not clear. Not human. But something older. Lucas felt his skin prickle. Is that... He started. The old tongue, Monroe confirmed. It's been broadcasting for thousands of years. Lucas stepped closer. From where? Monroe pointed at the map on the screen. A red dot blinked near the edge of known space. A dead moon, he said. No name, no history, just ruins. Maya frowned. Then why would anyone send a signal from there? Monroe looked at her. Because someone was trying to be heard. Lucas swallowed hard. We have to go there. Back on Earth, Nina. Wasn't wasting time either. She had barely returned to her apartment before she started packing. She knew Moore and his people were still watching her. She could feel their eyes on her every step, but she also knew she couldn't stay. She needed to find Logan, and she needed to warn him. Logan was still working security at the United Space Command base, but he had already started asking questions. Quiet ones, careful ones. When she found him outside a small diner late at night, he looked tired. You shouldn't be here, he said. I don't have a choice, Nina replied. He studied her face. What did they do to you? She shook her head. Nothing, yet. He sighed. Then we need to move fast. Inside the diner, they sat in a corner booth away from the windows. Nina pulled out a small notebook and slid it toward him. This is what we found, she said. Lucas is on Titan. He thinks there's more out there. Logan flipped through the pages. His brow furrowed. These symbols, he muttered. They look like military codes. Nina nodded. Maybe because some of them were used by early space programs. We just never understood them. Logan closed the book. Where's he going next? To that signal, Nina said. To the ruins. He looked up at her. You think it's real? I think, she said slowly. We're about to find out. On Titan, preparations were underway. Lucas and Maya had secured a small transport ship, a civilian model used for short-range missions between moons. It wasn't fast, but it was reliable. Monroe wouldn't be joining them. You'll need to see it for yourselves, he told them as they loaded supplies. I've done my part. Lucas looked at him. What happens if we don't come back? Monroe gave a small smile. Then someone else will follow, and someone after that. This isn't about us anymore. Lucas nodded. He understood. This was bigger than any one person. As the ship lifted off, Titan fell behind them. The journey would take days, maybe longer, but neither of them spoke much during the trip. They both knew what they were chasing. Truth. and maybe something more. The signal led them to a moon orbiting a long-dead gas giant. There was no name listed in official records, just coordinates and a warning label. Unexplored. Stability unknown. The ship descended through thick clouds, landing on a rocky plateau surrounded by jagged cliffs and frozen lakes. Everything was silent, too silent. Lucas and Maya stepped out, boots crunching against ice. They carried only what they needed: scanners, lights, and a small translator unit Monroe had given them. "This place is ancient," Maya whispered. Lucas nodded. "Feels like no one's been here in forever." They followed the signal deeper into the ruins. It wasn't long before they found it, a derelict station half buried in snow and stone. The structure was unlike anything built by humans or Zalari. It looked organic, like it had grown from the rock itself. Inside, the walls were covered in carvings, symbols, words. Lucas ran his fingers over them. "These are the same ones," he murmured, "but clearer, more complete." Maya activated the translator. The device flickered, then began scanning. Lines of text appeared on the screen. Slowly, the meaning became clear. "We were the first. We built the way forward. We left warnings." Lucas swallowed. "This isn't just writing, it's a record." Maya pointed ahead. "There's more." They moved deeper into the station, following the path of the symbols. Finally, they reached a large chamber. In the center stood a broken console, and beside it, a holographic projector. Lucas hesitated, then touched the panel. The room lit up. A figure appeared. It was a woman. Her face was calm, her eyes sharp. She wore armor unlike anything Lucas had ever seen. Sleek, layered, almost glowing. She spoke, not in English, in the old tongue. Lucas and Maya froze. Then the translator kicked in. "If you are hearing this," the woman said, "then we are gone, but our blood still walks among the stars." Lucas felt his heart pound. Maya whispered, "Our blood." The woman continued, "We were not alone. Others came after. They erased our names, our history, our truth, but they could not silence our voice forever." The projection paused. Then, she looked directly at them. "Speak again," she said. "Remember who you are." And then she was gone. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Maya turned to Lucas. "What does this mean?" Lucas stared at the empty space where the woman had stood. "It means," he said softly, "we're not just descendants of aliens." He took a breath. "We are their children." Maya looked at him, shocked. Lucas met her gaze. "And if we remember," he said, "the Zalari won't be gods anymore." Lucas and Maya sat in silence inside the ancient station, staring at the space where the holographic woman had stood. Her words echoed in their minds. "Remember who you are." Outside, the wind howled across the frozen moon. Inside, something far older than either of them had just spoken, and it had changed everything. Lucas finally stood up. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice was steady. "We need to get this back," he said. "We have to show everyone." Maya looked at him. "You know what that means, right?" He nodded. "The Zalari won't let us." She sighed. "Then we'll have to make sure they don't stop us." They gathered what they could: recordings, scans, and copies of the symbols carved into the walls. Lucas made sure to include the full playback of the hologram message. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. They left the ruins behind and returned to their ship. As they lifted off, Lucas looked down at the moon one last time. Somewhere beneath all that ice and stone, the truth had waited for thousands of years. Now, it was coming home. Back on Earth, Nina and Logan were preparing for the next move. Nina had been released from custody, but she knew the government was still watching her. Agent Moore hadn't threatened her directly, but his warning had been clear. "They'll try to stop you," he had said before letting her go. She didn't care. She met with Logan in a small apartment near the edge of the city. They had no windows, and no internet connection, just an old laptop and a secure drive hidden under the floorboards. "Any word from Lucas?" Logan asked as he checked the locks. Nina shook her head. "Not yet, but if he found what we think he did..." Logan finished the sentence. "Then the world is about to change." She looked at him carefully. "Are you ready for that?" He gave a tired smile. "I've been ready since the day I met you two." There was a knock at the door. Both of them froze. Logan moved first, grabbing a small tool from his jacket. He peeked through the peephole, then relaxed. "It's Tasha," he said, opening the door. Tasha Liu stepped in, carrying a backpack and looking nervous. "I had to lose a tail," she said. "Someone's watching us again." Nina frowned. "How much do they know?" Tasha dropped the bag on the table. "Enough to be scared." She pulled out a small device. "I tapped into a private Zalari communication line. Just for a few seconds, but I got this." She played the recording. A Zalari voice spoke softly, almost urgently. "The humans have found the signal. They are decoding the old tongue. We must act now," another voice responded. "If they speak it, they will remember. And if they remember, we are no longer gods." The message ended. Silence filled the room. Finally, Tasha whispered, "They're afraid." Logan crossed his arms. "Good." Lucas and Maya returned to Titan orbit 3 days later. Their ship docked at a civilian station used mostly by traders and scientists. No official records, no security cameras. Perfect for staying off the radar. Maya looked at the data again. "We should send this to Nina first. She'll know what to do." Lucas agreed. He opened a secure channel and sent the file. Less than an hour later, Nina replied. Her message was short and direct. "We're ready." The plan was simple. Too simple, maybe. But sometimes the simplest plans worked best. Lucas would return to Earth disguised as a diplomatic envoy. He had connections, people who owed him favors. With Maya's help, they created a fake identity and forged travel documents. Meanwhile, Nina, Logan, and Tasha prepared for the broadcast. They couldn't risk sending the files online. Too many eyes, too many filters. So instead, they planned to leak the information live. At the next public summit between Earth leaders and the Zalari delegation, it was happening in Geneva, in the Grand Assembly Hall. A major event, live-streamed, watched by millions. Perfect. The day of the summit arrived. Lucas walked through the halls of the United Space Command building, dressed in a formal coat and carrying a diplomatic badge. He looked calm, but his heart was pounding. He passed through security without issue. Inside the hall, the Zalari delegation stood on the main stage. 3 of them, tall, robed figures speaking in smooth, musical tones. Behind the scenes, Nina and Tasha were already in position. Hidden in the control room, they had access to the live feed. Logan waited outside, ready to move if things went wrong. Lucas took his place among the human envoys. The summit began. One of the Zalari speakers stepped forward. "The humans continue to grow," she said. "But they are not yet ready for full integration into the galactic community." A murmur spread through the crowd. Lucas stood up. All eyes turned to him. "I disagree," he said. The Zalari tilted her head. "You speak out of turn." Lucas ignored her. He stepped forward until he was standing beside the delegation. Then, he did something no one expected. He spoke. Not in English. In the old tongue. The moment the words left his mouth, the air changed, the O. Zalari flinched. One of them stumbled back. Another gasped. The third simply stared at him, eyes wide. Lucas kept going. He spoke the words from the ruins, from the hologram, from the forgotten past, and the effect was immediate. Across the room, people reacted. Some stood up. Others reached for their devices. On the live stream, viewers around the world saw it happen. The Zalari, powerful, ancient beings, were afraid because, for the first time in centuries, someone had remembered. The reaction was instant. Within minutes, the summit was in chaos. Security rushed in. Reporters shouted questions. The Zalari tried to regain control, but it was too late. The footage was already spreading. Social networks lit up. Scientists analyzed the speech. Historians debated its meaning. And deep within secret government offices, high-ranking officials watched in silence. Agent Carl Moore sat alone in a dark room replaying the video. Lucas Grant, standing tall, speaking the forbidden language. Moore closed his eyes. Then he picked up his phone. "Get me the president," he said. Back in the control room, Nina and Tasha watched the stream. Tasha grinned. "That actually worked," Nina smiled. "Of course it did." They quickly uploaded the full version of the hologram message to every major news network and independent archive site they could find. Within hours, the world was watching. The woman in armor. Her voice. Her warning. "If you are hearing this, then we are gone, but our blood still walks among the stars." People everywhere stopped what they were doing. Religious leaders reevaluated their teachings. Military leaders reviewed classified reports, and ordinary citizens, students, workers, families, looked at the sky differently. Because for the first time, they weren't just reaching for the stars. They were remembering they belonged there. The world had changed overnight. News stations replayed the same footage over and over. Lucas Grant standing in front of the Zalari, speaking a language no one had heard in thousands of years. His voice, calm but powerful, echoed across screens. In every home, every city, every nation, and the Zalari, they had not spoken since. Not publicly. For the first time in recorded history, they had gone silent. Across Earth, people reacted in different ways. Some were afraid, others were hopeful. But most felt something deeper, a sense of awakening, a memory returning. In secret meetings, world leaders debated what to do next. Scientists rushed to study the recovered recordings. Historians tried to piece together what had been erased from human history. And somewhere, far above it all, the Zalari watched. Waiting. Lucas, Nina, Maya, Logan, and Tasha stood together in a secure room beneath the United Space Command headquarters. Outside, the city buzzed with news and speculation. Inside, they were preparing for what came next. Nina looked at Lucas. "Did you expect this?" He shook his head. "Not like this." Maya sat near a monitor, watching as more and more data was uncovered. "People are already translating parts of the language," she said. "It's spreading fast." Logan crossed his arms. "So what now? Do we wait for them to come to us?" Tasha tapped on her tablet. "They already have." She turned the screen toward them. A message had arrived just minutes ago from the Zalari. It was short. "We request a meeting, not as gods, not as rulers, as equals." Silence filled the room. Then Lucas spoke. "It's time." The summit took place 2 days later. This time it wasn't held in Geneva or any government building. It was held aboard a neutral station orbiting Earth, an old research platform that had once belonged to an international science group before being abandoned. No flags, no weapons. Just a table, a few chairs, and a view of Earth through the window. Lucas and his team arrived first. Lucas wore simple clothes, no uniform, no badge. He looked tired but steady. Nina sat beside him. Her fingers tapped lightly on the table, a nervous habit she couldn't break. Maya stayed close to the equipment, ready to record everything. She knew this moment would be studied for generations. Logan and Tasha stood behind them, watching the door. They didn't trust the Zalari, not fully, but they were ready. When the Zalari entered, the air seemed to shift. 3 of them walked in, their robes flowing like liquid light. Their faces were calm, but their eyes showed something new. Respect. One of them stepped forward. She was taller than the others, and her voice carried a quiet strength. "You have spoken the old tongue," she said. "You have remembered." Lucas met her gaze. We were never supposed to forget. The Zilari woman nodded slowly. Then she did something no one expected. She bowed. Behind Lucas, Nina gasped softly. The other Zilari followed suit, bowing. To humans. Lucas stood up. He took a breath, then spoke. Not in English, but in the old tongue. The words rolled off his tongue like water finding its path. We are the ones who came before. We are the ones who were lost. And now, we return. The Zilari listened. Their expressions shifted. Not fear this time, but understanding. The leader spoke again, still in the ancient language. You were born of us. You were scattered, forgotten, but now you are whole again. Lucas translated for the others. Maya whispered, We're not just descendants. We're part of them, the Zilari leader continued. We were not gods, only keepers of a truth too, dangerous to share until now. Lucas asked the question everyone wanted answered, why hide it? The Zilari woman looked out the window at Earth. We feared what would happen if you remembered, she said. Because when you remember, you change. She paused. And when you change, the stars open again. Back on Earth, the world was already changing. Cities lit up with new energy. People gathered in public squares, not in protest but in celebration. Schools began rewriting history books. Religious groups reevaluated their teachings. Governments debated how to move forward, and spaceports prepared for something they had only dreamed of, expansion, not as subjects of alien rule, but as equals, as kin. Weeks passed. More ruins were discovered. More messages were decoded. The language spread like fire across the planet, studied by linguists, scientists, and ordinary people alike. Children learned it in school. Engineers used it to unlock old technology buried beneath ice and stone. And explorers set out beyond the solar system, guided by maps written in the old tongue. Lucas and his team became known as the first voices, the ones who had brought back the past. They didn't ask for power. They didn't seek fame. They simply opened the door, and humanity walked through. On a cold morning, Lucas stood alone on a hill overlooking the ocean. The sky was clear and the wind was gentle. Behind him, Nina joined him. She handed him a cup of tea. You okay? She asked. He smiled. Yeah, just thinking. She looked at the horizon. Do you ever wonder what comes next? He nodded. Every day. She sipped her tea. What do you think it will be? Lucas thought for a moment. I think, he said slowly, we go home. Nina frowned. Earth is our home. He shook his head. Not this Earth, the one before. She stared at him. He looked at the sky. There's more out there, he said. More waiting for us, more to remember. She smiled. Then let's find it. Together they stood in silence, watching the sun rise. Above them, ships moved between planets. Below them, cities hummed with life. And in the distance, beyond the stars, something waited. Something familiar. Something forgotten. But not for long. Because the language had returned, and with it, so had they.